And Steve Hilton, he is former senior advisor to former British Prime Minister David Cameron. Steve, great to see you.
Great to be back.
Thank you so much for joining us. So the polls are showing Trump and Clinton at a virtual tie. They are so neck and neck right now. Now early voters are being encouraged to change their vote. What do you think the polls will show if early voters take action? And well, what's your state of the race right now from your standpoint?
I think it shows something really true about this race all along, which is that when Trump is focused, when he talks about the issues, when he talks about his message of change, he does well. And he's been doing that more recently. And then to your point about how Hillary Clinton's handling this last stage, it's amazing to me. She's been plotting and scheming to get this job for 30 years. She's a week out from the big day, and what is she doing yesterday? Wheeling out Miss Universe to make personal attacks? She has got no positive message about the change that she wants to bring and how she's going to help people's lives. It's all about attacking Donald Trump. And
Which is why I keep asking all our guests, what is her vision? What is her economic plan? I don't know.
Well, they're trying to take him off message. Is what they're trying to do. With the advertisement, with the Billy Bush tape, they're trying to make him pivot to that.
It should be about bigger things than that. And I think to his credit, I thought what Trump was doing yesterday with Pence, I thought it was a really excellent event focusing on Obamacare, something real that affects real people. And when he does that, he does better. And I think that's why in this final stage the whole race seems to be much closer than anyone would have predicted a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So let me ask you, we've talked about how many parallels there are between Donald Trump and Brexit. What do you think the key to Brexit success was that would give some kind of an indicator to what's happening here?
I think there's two really big points that we need to think about. One is the underlying reasons that there are so many people who are disillusioned and fed up with the political class, with the whole system, and want some kind of really big disruptive change. You saw that with Brexit. Here you see it with the fact that for many years now, and this is not even a partisan point, if you look at the income statistics, half of all Americans earn less today than 16 years ago.
That's right.
So they've had 8 years of Bush, 8 years of Obama, and their income is lower.
They're still not
any fed up with everything.
Fed up,
and they're thinking, you know what, let's just try this. He seems like a really big change. And I think that's the similarity with Brexit in one sense. The other is, of course, the moral shaming that was directed at Brexit supporters. If you support Brexit, you're a racist, you're xenophobic, you're a bigot. Exactly the same as what's going on here. And what that means is you've got an awful lot, I think, of, just as you had secret Brexit supporters who wouldn't really say
admit it. They didn't want to admit it.
I think you're going to see a lot of secret Trump supporters. I hear that the whole time.
Me too.
And that's why I think there's a really close parallel. You also see it with the markets. I mean, look at when the polls tighten and the markets, of course, the insiders and those who kind of find the continuity of a Clinton presidency reassuring because they kind of know what's going to happen, i.e. more of the same. They're nervous when they think there might be a big change coming.
Right, because it's an uncertainty factor.
Yeah, look, I think she should be, I think the candidacy that wins is the first female president of the United States. One who's ready to lead immediately with all of her, her lengthy resume, Secretary of State, her husband presiding over an economic expansion. All of those would be optimistic messages, and I would think that would have changed the tone as opposed to being negative and attacking the idea of change, because it seems like the similarity between Brexit and this election is change. It's not working. Let's have a radical change to shake things up.
And I think the use of the word radical is really important. It's not just any old change. It's like we're really angry with what's been going on. We've really been let down by politicians all across the board, and we want to really shake things up.
Yeah, for sure. Steve, great to see you.
Great to be with you.
Thank you so much. Steve Hilton joining us there.
For the breaking news story of the morning, an ambush attack on 2 Iowa police officers. A suspect has been named, Scott Michael Green. He's 46. He's still on the loose. The Des Moines Police Department holding a news conference this morning. Roll tape.
It doesn't look like there was any interaction between these officers and whoever the coward is that shot them while they sat in their cars.
That's a very difficult scene indeed, very difficult, a very emotional young man right there, and worthily so. Former U.S. Attorney General John Ashcroft is with us now. Sir, I maintain that there is a political element to these attacks, these ambush attacks on the police. You agree with that, sir?
Well, I believe we have allowed or fostered even at the highest levels of our government a disrespect for police. And there has been an erosion of the trust in the justice community, and some of that erosion of the trust by the public is justified as a result of very disappointing and even embarrassing conduct in the justice community, from the very absence of the ability to prosecute people at the top of the social order to the lack of confidence that people at the bottom of the social order have in their ability to be protected. So when you have a situation where people that, you know, ordinary folks don't believe in the protection afforded by the justice community, and the people at the top believe they can't be prosecuted by the justice community, there's a crisis in America as it relates to the respect for law enforcement and justice generally. And I can't say that that's the cause of this particular shooting. We don't know what the cause is. But we've seen this erosion over time, and there have been times when this administration has literally fostered a sort of a disrespect for much of the law enforcement community, and those chickens, unfortunately, have come home to roost.
Should we have very soon a statement from the Justice Department on this Iowa situation?
Well, I can't imagine that the Justice Department wouldn't be deeply concerned about members of the justice community that are being literally ambushed. This doesn't appear to be a situation where police officers were conducting some sort of an investigation or actually had a relationship. But this appears to be an ambush setting. And this disrespect for law enforcement officials and the people who every day leave their homes and their families not knowing whether or not they will be able to return because they're willing to stand between the criminal elements of our society and law-abiding citizens, and in return for that, they deserve our respect and they deserve our support. So I would anticipate the Justice Department would at least express itself in total support for the maintenance of security for our law enforcement officials.
Mr. Attorney General, it's been an opinion has been expressed on this program that the Justice Department is compromised, and the former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, said that he was embarrassed by the Justice Department. You're a former Attorney General. Would you like to comment on this?
Well, if the reports of the Wall Street Journal during the last week signaling that the Justice Department has restrained the FBI in its ability to investigate, and by that restraint I mean refused to grant them the ability to have grand juries or grant them the ability to issue subpoenas, if that has happened so as to restrain, otherwise curtail the thoroughness of an investigation, both into the Clinton Foundation and into the email settings, that would be extremely disappointing, and it would be literally an embarrassment to the department. It's, you know, people should not distinguish so graphically between the Foundation investigation and national security. When you're talking about the potential of a pay-for-play situation that relates to national policy has an ultimate objective, and the ultimate objective of national policy is national security. So to distinguish, oh, that don't have to worry about that, that's just related to foreign policy. Well, foreign policy is a fundamental element in national security, and it shouldn't ever be compromised based on the enrichment of any official or even in the enrichment of a charitable organization or foundation.
Mr. Attorney General, John Ashcroft, thank you very much for joining us, sir.
I'm going to bring in former Mississippi Governor and RNC Chairman Haley Barbour. Governor, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Maria.
So the premiums in Mississippi, Obamacare premiums, expected to rise about 25%. Is that right?
That'd be the national average, and I don't think it'll be any less than that.
So what is that resonating with voters? What are you seeing there, Governor?
Well, look, Obamacare has been very unpopular from the beginning because it was predicated on some things that the American people were told that simply weren't true. You can keep your doctor if you want to. You can keep your plan if you want to. Well, both those things are just absolutely blatantly false. You'll save $2,500 a year on your health insurance premium, President Obama taught us. It's not a tax. And yet, when the Supreme Court allowed it to come into effect, they said it is because it is a tax is the only reason it's constitutional. So the American people have plenty to be skeptical about, including how it's gone. You know, the idea, how do you pay for it? Only about 11.5 million people have benefited from Obamacare, according to what was put out this year by the administration itself.
Right.
And it goes
now, most of those people had health insurance before Obamacare existed. They turned in their health insurance because they wanted to get a subsidy. 86% of all the people who belong to the exchanges get a subsidy that averages $3,400 a year.
Yeah, this was an ideology. I mean, I know I've said this before, but the bottom line is, in the president's first 2 years in office, he had both chambers. He could have done anything. And what does he choose to do right after, where we're fresh off of a massive financial collapse in 2007? What does he choose to do? Stick Obamacare down everybody's throats instead of focusing on economic growth. We needed to focus on economic growth in his first 2 years in office.
Well, and there's no question Americans look back and recognize that, and by the way, Americans thought it at the time. But this has been a dream of the left for generations, to have a government-run health care system, and Obamacare is designed to inevitably lead to a government-run health care system, something Hillary Clinton proposed 1993-94, and the Democrat Congress wouldn't even vote on it.
You know, I think it's so fascinating, too, because it's a bigger failure than just for the people who are getting increase in premiums. We're seeing that insurance companies can't afford to stay in it, and then we're also seeing freelancers and other people who are trying to buy their insurance. Their premiums are going up. People are getting less covered. We're going to get our prescriptions. Those costs are going up, and it's just a failure all the way around.
Well, it is, and the other thing that people overlook, 16 million people were added to the Medicaid rolls as part of Obamacare. I mean, if they wanted to help the poorest people, the people who couldn't afford, it would have been simpler just to put people on Medicaid. And in most states like mine, Medicaid is a very full, vibrant system for our poor people, for people who can't afford health care. But instead, they screwed up the whole private market, just as you said, and really could have done it with Medicaid.
Yeah. So there's Obamacare, and then there's corruption. Interim DNC chairwoman Donna Brazile, out as a CNN contributor. She was fired after WikiLeaks revealed that she sent 2 questions to the Clinton campaign during the primary debates. Here's former CNN President Jonathan Klein. He went on with Megyn Kelly last night.
I think CNN has come to the conclusions they have because they've done an investigation. And they may not want to talk about all of the internal workings, but I can tell you that nothing is taken more seriously within the walls of CNN, both when I was there, which is 6 years ago, and today, than issues around the integrity of the place. And they sweat a comma in a report.
So how did it happen then, if there's such integrity? Governor Barbara, what do you think? I mean, Donna Brazile, we have the emails. She sent the email to John Podesta. Hillary Clinton will be asked about the Flint, Michigan crisis from a woman with a rash. Hillary Clinton will be asked about, was it gun control, Dagan? That was the first question?
Yes, gun control was the first question, and then the second one was the Flint water crisis.
Yeah, she cheated. I mean, should she have said, hey, I got the questions. I just want to raise my hand here.
Well, the thing to me is that how little coverage has gotten in the news media. I'm glad you had something on it last night on Fox, but the fact of the matter is the American people have sort of shrugged about this because they already knew that most of the liberal media elite were totally for Clinton, against Trump, and so this didn't come as a surprise to too many people.
Yeah.
When you look at where political contributions went, the liberal media elite gives all their money to Clinton.
That's nowhere.
Hey, Governor, Don Peebles, a question for you. This is more than just a liberal slant to an editorial coverage. This is actually dealing with the integrity of our political process and our debate process.
Exactly.
Wouldn't this be a matter that the FCC should be regulating or investigating? Because this undermines our democracy to a degree. And by the way, I'm a Democrat. So but I think the whole system is predicated on fair play. So what do you think should be done about this? Because I don't think it can go unchecked, and CNN firing her, is that sufficient?
John, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know the limits of the Federal Communications Commission's authority in this sort of thing. You know, for years and years we had sort of fair play rules that applied. How much that would be applicable to this? But it sure is. It is exactly what you say. When Donald Trump made his point yesterday about if this were Reince Priebus giving information to Donald Trump, there would be an explosion in the liberal media elite that would blow your ears off.
Yeah, right.
And the fact that it's not today speaks volumes.
By the way, before you go, Governor, what's your thought on these down-ballot races for the Senate? You've got Marco Rubio versus Patrick Murphy in Florida, Kelly Ayotte versus Governor Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire, Pat Toomey versus Katie McGinty in Pennsylvania, and replacing Harry Reid in Nevada, Joe Heck versus Catherine Cortez Masto. What's your take?
Well, there are about 8 races that are very close within the margin of error in the Senate. And, of course, Republicans have a 4-seat majority. I mean, they can lose 3 seats and still have the majority. A 4th if Kaine becomes vice president. We lose the Senate. 5 if we keep the White House, if we win the White House. But the one thing about this race, these down-ticket races, these senators knew from the start, with 24 Republican seats up and 10 Democrats, that they were going to be under a lot of pressure. They've run really good campaigns. They're running ahead of Trump in almost every one of these 8 states. And Trump is rising now in all of these states. I think we'll probably keep the Senate, but it's really, really a lot of pressure. And it's a credit to these individual senators and candidates like Joe Heck that they have run a race, that they are able to make the race about themselves and their opponents and not let it be overridden by what's going on nationally.
Yeah. Governor, good to see you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Governor Barbour there. Fox. Welcome back. Earnings season in full swing. Allergan reporting third-quarter results last hour. Both profit and revenue coming in below Wall Street expectations. The stock is up ahead of the open as the company also announced it will expand its share buyback program and will start paying a dividend next year. Joining me right now in a Fox Business exclusive is the chairman and CEO of Allergan, CEO Brent Saunders. Brent, good to see you.
Nice to have you so much. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to see you. So first, the earnings in the quarter. What drove the quarter? What were the highlights?
Yeah, so a little disappointing quarter for us. Most of that miss was related to some older products that either went generic or some of the older products that are competing against generics. But the good news is our growth drivers, the most important products that we have, all grew strong double digits. Botox up 15%. Restasis up 13%, Linzess up 42%, just to name a few.
Yeah, and those are really important products for the company. You believe that's where the growth is going to come from going forward.
That is our future. The products that didn't grow, Namenda XR, for example, are not our future. That really is almost our past, but the future looks incredibly strong, and it gives us great confidence in our ability to continue growing when you look at the main products, the things that we're going to be focusing on for the next few years, 5 years, 10 years, having such great growth. And we launched a few new products this year, and they're doing really great. In fact, they contribute about $90 million of sales in the quarter.
Yeah, tell me about the pipeline. A lot of analysts talking about the pipeline promising, and it's a pipeline that's being undervalued in terms of the whole Allergan story.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that.
What's most important in the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't get a lot of credit for our pipeline. We're out talking about it more and more, particularly as we move some of these things into late phase. So this quarter, we moved an important drug, Repastinel, into phase 3. This could be a revolutionary new treatment for depression, and so we're very excited about that. We have a new migraine drug, Abrojapant, in phase 3. We're expecting data on a new drug called Esmia, the first pharmacological therapy for uterine fibroids for women, around the first quarter of this year, so we finished that work. We have a new drug for AMD in phase 3, mid-stage phase 3, that could change the paradigm for people with AMD. So we have some really big blockbusters in the pipeline in late-stage testing. We'll be moving our NASH drug that we just acquired into phase 3 in the first half of next year. So we're really moving this pipeline.
So when you talk about phase 3, that means it could be on the market, what?
And it depends on each drug, but let's say after the study about a year. So
a year. Right. That's
you're talking about 2 years total.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier in terms of the weak spots here. You know, generics. That's your life. I mean, this is like the normal, right? I mean, you're always going to see that kind of competition.
You do. There's a normal product cycle in pharmaceuticals. Generally, you have a drug to sell or market anywhere from 7 to 10 years. There's some exceptions for that, especially biologics or drugs like Botox that have longer lives, or commercial lives, if you will. But yes, absolutely, and we're used to it. And what we want to do is we want to be ahead of the product recycle game. So many big pharmaceutical companies, they go through hills and valleys. What we've done at Allergan is we built our portfolio, much like you'd build a bond portfolio. We laddered the programs. We gave ourselves several shots on goal. And as some of our bigger products come off, we should have 2 or 3 big ones replacing each one. Not always going to work out because it's science. Sometimes studies don't work. But that's the game that we're playing. That's what we're trying to get done, and we're trying to innovate for patients.
So earlier this year, you tried to merge with Pfizer. You were unable to do that, obviously, because of regulators pushing back. So now you're expanding your buyback program. This is a big deal. This is what markets are reacting to this morning. What was behind the move to expand that buyback and pay the dividend?
Yeah, so we're doing 2 big capital allocations this quarter. One is we're expanding our buyback to a total of $15 billion. 5 we've already completed, and $10 billion we're announcing today we're going to do as an accelerated share repurchase, or ASR, so we can take most of those shares out of the share count immediately. So a really fast way of getting some accretion. The reason we're doing that particular capital allocation is when we look at all the things we can buy, and we're still looking at stepping stone style acquisitions to buy, there's nothing more accretive than buying our own stock. We believe our stock is fundamentally undervalued. And so here's a great opportunity in perhaps a tough market for healthcare to go out and buy a lot of stock back and get some massive accretion for our company.
So will 2017 be a year also of smaller fill-in deals that you are looking to create more growth at the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So the move that we're making today, both the buyback and the dividend of about 70 cents, leaves us enough firepower and enough free cash flow that the majority of what we can do is still go out and invest for growth. And so we really tried to balance or find the right balance point for these capital allocation decisions. And the first goal we have is investing for growth.
A couple of weeks ago, we saw all the pharmaceutical companies, stocks sell off, biotech sold off, because there was this expectation that the Democrats would get a sweep in the presidency, the House and Senate, and then there would be a cap on drug prices. You put your own unofficial cap on drug prices, didn't you?
We did.
You say you have a contract with America. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so over the summer, we adopted or formalized or codified what we call our social contract with patients. And it really is about balancing the need to invest in innovation, cures and treatments for unmet medical need, with responsible pricing and providing access to medicine. There's another component that talks about education and manufacturing reliability and quality. But the main thing that we're trying to say is these drug price increases that we read about sometimes or hear about on your program have to stop. We need responsible action by the pharmaceutical industry. We need responsible action by the other participants in the drug pricing system to make sure that drugs are priced appropriately, that people can afford them, that there's accessibility. And so Allergan is absolutely committed to doing their part, and we're not going to take those big price increases.
And by the way, if you don't do it and Hillary Clinton is the president, you will be forced to do it.
I think that's right. I think we need to self-regulate.
Exactly.
The last thing anybody wants is a government takeover of healthcare, right? And so self-discipline, self-control, and frankly, just doing the right thing is easy.
Let me ask you real quick before you go. As a business guy, would you invest more, create more jobs under a 15% tax rate? I mean, I'm looking at the tax plans of Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. I don't want to get political on you, but I also want to know if lower taxes on a corporate level would actually change your behavior.
Yeah, so it's a great issue. For me, it's very simple. The best way to think about corporate taxes is just a cost of doing business, right? There's nothing patriotic about paying taxes. There's no morality around paying taxes. It's a legal obligation.
It's dollars and cents.
If you take a mortgage deduction, is that unpatriotic? No. So let's be clear. These things that they call loopholes, or pundits or politicians like to call loopholes, they aren't. They're the tax code. The tax code is filled with exceptions and opportunities to lower your tax.
So the answer is yes.
And so yes, if you can lower the cost of doing business, whether it be raw materials, whether it be taxes, whether it be labor, you're going to do more, right?
So that you could invest that elsewhere.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, the short answer is absolutely. A lower tax rate, lower cost of doing business, more money to invest, particularly for us in innovation, in jobs, in science, and new drugs.
Brent, good to have you on the program.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Brent Saunders, CEO, Allergan. They're coming up.
Yeah, and I think, look, Americans don't need statistics to tell them the economy is grinding out.
That's true.
And it's slow. They're living it every day. And so what's happened here is they've been having this frustration, this environment of, kind of this new norm of just a grind out, small growth in income, getting further and further behind. That's going to have the impact on the election. And all these statistics are validating that. When we look at, economic activity, they're validating what Americans are feeling. And I think that will be felt at the polls on Tuesday.
You mentioned New York is one of those states where tax revenue is down. People are moving out because of the tax story, because of few opportunities. Are you going to run for mayor?
Well, look, I'm thinking about it. Look, this is every time I kind of get to a point where, I say, I love my business. I've got a 22-year-old son who's working in the company, and I like what I'm doing. I got the best job I could possibly have. I see something else happen, and I see the city getting further and further at risk. And here we are again where, under this administration, 17,000 new jobs have been created by the government, only 1,200 for cops, the rest for social services, and business taxes are down 20%. And
business tax revenue.
Yeah, business tax revenue is down 20%.
So would you cut taxes?
Yeah, of course, because there's no other way to sustain. This model of expanding taxes and burdening entrepreneurs and businesses with the inefficiency of this city's operations is not a sustainable one. Yeah. And the fact that you have no real opportunity for upward mobility for our minority communities here. That is something.
So you're going to announce it after Thanksgiving?
I'm going to make a decision after Thanksgiving, and if I were going to run, it will be in January when I would announce.
All right. Good. I wanted to get that out there, just in case.
Got with me Trump economic advisor Peter Navarro. He's on the inside of the Trump camp when it comes to economics and markets. Now, a lot of headlines saying it's a Trump possible victory that pushed the market down yesterday and down a bit today. What say you?
It's not the VIX, okay? So.
No more buzzer.
Look, let's do the analysis here. We've been in a downward trend for a month, right? And for most of that month, Clinton looked like to be the victor. And so what the market, to me, was saying, look, we don't want any more of that slow growth because corporate earnings are going to be down, stock prices are going to be down. So a Clinton victory virtually assured a bear market. What's going on now is simply just a lot of volatility trying to figure out what scenario's going to happen. Is it Trump? Is it Clinton? Is it a divided Congress and White House? It could go either way. You could have a Republican president and a Democrat. So people need to just take a deep breath now. The momentum's with Trump because of corruption, because of Obamacare, because people are finally looking at jobs and understanding that Trump is the only hope for growth. And so being in cash is not a bad thing right now, but putting your money down for Trump would be a bull market bet.
20 seconds. I think that no matter who wins on November the 8th, the market goes down on November the 9th.
I've written about this and said we will have a correction before we move forward. But I'll tell you what, the power of Trump's economic plan is so good that we may be able to avoid that correction because we'll see a Reagan-esque move.
Now today,
I said earlier is I'm looking for the road to economic growth in Hillary Clinton's plan. And I truly can't find it. I mean, it's just a different approach. How do you get income inequality in terms of move the needle there? How do you get economic growth? Do you creating an environment that's attractive for business to create jobs? That means lower taxes and lower wages and a rollback of regulations. Or do you do it from the bottom up, looking at education and making it more expensive for business? Isn't that going to stifle their job creation?
No, I think if you look at her plan, the income inequality issue is there, but if you look at her economic growth plan to create jobs, to get, the manufacturing in this country, I'm a free trader, but free trade today is a bad word on both parties, and that's not right. I mean, it's technology that has caused some of the problems with the free trade agreements. It's not the agreements themselves. I think we've got to find ways to
keep manufacturing in the United States, the jobs in the U.S., and she has a plan to do that.
What is it?
The plan is to basically take some of the revenue of that manufacturing that is overseas, give them incentives to keep the jobs here, but also move some of those funds from the revenue into infrastructure, into doing something about our roads, our bridges, our broadband, our internet, our electricity grid. I was energy secretary. I almost got pilloried when I said that our grid was a third world grid. I think we need those public-private investments. That's her plan.
But if you're trying to start a business, if you look at her plan, she complicates the tax code even more, whether you're talking about capital gains taxes or even income taxes. There is more regulation that will be put into place, making Obamacare, quite frankly, a little more complicated. And so when a business owner looks at it, they want simplicity, not something that makes it more difficult to deal with the government.
More red tape.
Right.
I believe she's well-intended, by the way. I think she wants to do these things. I just think she's got a 1990s solution to a 2020 and 2016 issue. And that's, I think, where a lot of us are getting lost.
Well, I haven't seen much of Trump except saying on economic issues, we're going to reduce taxes and no regulation. We're going to have a trade war with China, with Mexico. We're going to build a wall. I mean, that's his economic plan. No, he did. He's going to enact a bunch of tariff penalties with China.
Well,
I mean,
he said he wants to redo deals that are not advantageous to America. And if that means redoing NAFTA, if that means not doing TPP and doing a new deal with Asia, that's what it means, is what he said.
Well,
but he wants to roll back regulations and lower taxes. That's the crux of his plan.
Well, lower taxes for those in his income, but I don't see the equity
And the corporate tax rate, he's looking at 15%.
So
let's take the corporate tax rate to 15%.
Is there anything about Hillary Clinton's plan that you would do differently?
It's a good question.
On economic issues?
Yeah.
Well, I'm for the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I think for political reasons with the primary, she had to soften her support for it. But, I'm a free trader. That's 11 countries that would benefit from more free trade in Latin America and Asia, all over the world. I would have said, we're going to stick with this. We're going to fix it. Maybe stronger labor, environmental accords, find ways to deal with the prevailing wages in some of these countries. I would have done that a little differently. But I'm a free trader.
Can you believe
I'm an endangered species in the Democratic
Right,
Party.
especially in this election. Can you believe how tight this race is?
Polls at the end of every presidential election tighten. But, I'm encouraged. I voted for Hillary Clinton 4 days ago in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Big turnout, big Hispanic turnout. The early voting is favoring the Democrats because we have, I believe, a better ground game. Trump maybe has a lot of the news cycle, but you've got to get your voters out. And that's where this election is going to be decided in those 9 battleground states. Yeah. And I feel good. I feel confident.
Governor, good to see you.
All right.
Thank you so much. Governor Bill Richardson there. Special forces entering the outskirts of Mosul and taking the state television building. Joining me right now is the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, John Bolton. Ambassador, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
This is the first time Iraqi troops have set foot in Mosul in more than 2 years. How significant is this? How would you characterize the fight against ISIS right now?
Well, it's a part of their continuing advance, but let's face it, this has a lot more to do with American air power pounding on ISIS for weeks in advance of this than the Iraqi army. And while we should certainly celebrate any defeat inflicted on ISIS or any retreat they're forced to make, this battle is far from over. And even if when the Iraqi forces win, which I think it's inevitable they will, and will be a defeat for ISIS, it will also be a victory for Iran. As the Baghdad government and the Shia militia continue to advance. It's not strengthening the government we wanted to see in Baghdad after we overthrew Saddam Hussein. It's strengthening a satellite of the Ayatollahs. That's not good news.
Is this resonating with voters? I mean, President Obama spoke yesterday in Columbus, Ohio. He talked about Trump's temperament in relation to nuclear weapons. I want you to hear what he said yesterday. Ambassador, get your reaction.
We can't afford to give the nuclear codes to somebody so erratic. Hillary made a pretty good point. A man you can bait with a tweet is not somebody you want to trust with nuclear weapons.
Your thoughts, Ambassador?
Well, you know, it's the same slander that they've tried on other candidates before. I don't think it's making any impression. Certainly, I wouldn't support Trump if I had the slightest concern that he had the stability to handle the duties of commander-in-chief. So I think we're now down to the desperation level of attacks. I'd rather see a much more extensive discussion of national security, because I think it is going to be an issue over the next 4 years, whoever is elected president, and I'm deeply concerned that 4 more years of Obama's policies, which is what we would get with Hillary Clinton, are going to leave us in an even deeper hole than we're in now.
You know, one of the things that we keep seeing in the polls is that Donald Trump does better in national security when there's something active. And right now, we've seen that Hillary is doing better in the polls in national security. How do we explain the difference between the two of them?
Well, I think Hillary essentially is a clone of Obama when it comes to national security and domestic policy. While we're on the subject, there's a kind of legend out there that somehow she'll be tougher, stronger, an image assiduously courted by her flacks in the press, but I think not revealed by the record, not revealed by her 4 years as Secretary of State, where the biggest achievements, if you want to use that word, for the Obama administration were begun. The nuclear deal with Iran, just to name the most egregious failure. So to me, this is should be a discussion about whether you want 4 more years of Obama's policies or you want something different. And I think Trump, to peel everything else away, the central difference is that Trump has committed to rebuild America's military, which has been devastated by budget cuts over the last 7.5 years, and which undercuts our deterrent capability and the strength of our diplomacy.
So the current administration is saying that they think that ISIS is weakening and that they're defeating them, and so they're trying to say 4 more years is actually a good thing because they'll win.
Well, they have waited for 2 years to go back into Mosul, during which 2-year period ISIS, which is very sophisticated in propaganda terms, including in digital communications, has recruited God knows how many more terrorists, has deployed them, has laid the groundwork for more terrorist attacks, has increased its influence in countries all over the region, and prepared to exfiltrate its people if the noose closes. The delay, the slowness of the approach really has benefited ISIS in ways we can't even calculate. And I think it's a fundamental reflection that the president does not understand the ideological nature of the opponent that we're facing.
Ambassador, it's Dagan McDowell. Does I was in the room when we took down Osama bin Laden, does that resonate with the American people? Because that's the crutch that Hillary Clinton keeps leaning on when she's on the campaign trail.
God, I hope not, because it simply proves she was a bystander. That's wonderful. I watched on TV. Well, great. I mean, you know, I don't think it goes very far, but it just shows the paucity of her record, that she knew how to change the TV channel to the right one.
Well, you know, we also have, though, active situations now. I mean, North Korea reportedly preparing to launch another intermediate-range ballistic missile in the next 24 to 72 hours. The Clinton campaign says that Trump is unfit to deal with these escalating tensions, nuclear tensions with North Korea. What should the U.S. be doing here, and what would a Trump administration do in your view?
Well, I think fundamentally when you talk about nuclear proliferation, whether it's the Iran program, the North Korea program, the arms race in the Middle East we've seen develop over the past several years, the Obama-Clinton approach has fundamentally failed. These countries are making progress day by day toward that deliverable nuclear weapons capability, and people are just not paying attention to it. In the case of North Korea, the ultimate solution here is the reunification of the peninsula. That's what we ought to be talking to the Chinese about. We should have been doing it for the past 15 years. It really is a question whether you think America's place in the world, a strong American presence, leads to peace and stability, which I think is the Reagan approach and the right approach, or whether, like Obama, you think America is really part of the problem.
Yeah, Ambassador, what would you recommend the first 6 months of a Trump administration to start stabilizing the region? What would he do in that first 6 months, and what would you recommend being done?
Well, I'd certainly recommend that on the day he takes the oath of office, he announce he is abrogating the nuclear deal with Iran. It was a debacle for American strategic interest. He needs to make that clear, that it's really Iran that's the principal threat to peace and security in the Middle East. He needs to follow through on his commitment to accelerate the destruction of ISIS and to do it just as rapidly as possible. And he needs to make it clear to our friends in the region, the oil-producing monarchies of the Arabian Peninsula and Israel, that we are not going to see a continued decline of American interest in the region. I think the whole Middle East, North Africa from the Atlantic all the way over to Pakistan, is disintegrating into chaos. We have to reverse that. It's not going to be easy, but I think the president in his first days in office can really send the kind of political signals that will reassure our friends and remind our adversaries we are still the strongest power in the world.
Yeah, really great analysis, Ambassador. Great to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ambassador John Bolton there.